Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. I've been absent for a few days. I suffered a head injury. I was walking down the icy sidewalk and slid and fell backward on, the head. So I'm loopy. It might even be a concussion. It kind of hurt to take a shower and wash my hair. It hurt to touch it, but it feels okay now. So we'll see if this delivery is loopy or is not. But tonight's topic is based on an observation I've made and a result of thinking about it. Its main point is to simply expand your awareness. It's not necessarily a resolution to a problem or a cure for evil treatment. It's just something I've observed, and I've observed it in more than one occasion, but I've chosen to select one particular example to illustrate it. If you find yourselves, or have found yourselves, dealing with the famous cluster B monster, which this discussion would probably be more along the lines of the covert narcissist or the psychopathic antisocial personality, but it could apply to probably most of the cluster B disorders. First off, if you've dealt with such a person, you're probably already very well aware that they exhibit inconsistent behaviors, whether that be their lovey-dovey talk during the idealization as compared to the evil, sickening, heartless, hateful type behaviors you witness during the devaluation and or discard phases. And it's kind of hard to understand or comprehend how that horrifying behavior could come from the same person who did the lovey-dovey behavior. Well, part of this disorder is that these people lack what we could call a core self. Like most people have a core self. They have like a specific set of characteristics or a personality type that remains pretty consistent over multiple situations. Not to say it's going to during all situations, but the core is usually there. They may stray from it one direction or the other for extreme circumstances, but for the most part, they've got a pretty strong core self. Well, you'll notice that these types of creatures we're discussing do not have such a thing, and that probably will help explain why you've seen such behaviors. If there was a scale, A being really great and Z being really horrible, where you've seen behaviors from both sides of the spectrum, which has left your head spinning, wondering what you're dealing with, because you think in your mind you can't be an A on the scale and also a Z on the scale. It's just too big of a difference. Well, again, this relates to the fact that these people lack a core self. When they meet you, for example, they take on your core self that they pick up with every observation, and they try to emulate you, and you don't know any of this usually, but you will start to notice things they say that seem very similar to you, and you think, wow, we really click. But of course, later that falls apart. Because they lack a core self, they're fake, like we've talked about before. They're wearing a mask. So they are trying to appeal to your core self by emulating it the best they can. Well, the observation I made comes from many years ago when I was involved with such a person. I was very young, didn't know the word cluster B, and narcissist just meant somebody who thought they looked pretty. That's about it. So I didn't have any of these terms or knowledge then, but I did have the observations of a very toxic person. And this was one of those who would claim one thing today, but then behave in ways the next day that completely contradicted it, and when questioned didn't have any good answer, and that kind of stuff. Well, I was a young kid staying over at this person's home, and I'm not sure what happened, if the person just left temporarily, had to run an errand or something, but regardless, I found myself in the person's home unattended. And when you're involved with someone like this that you think you really like, but you notice little inconsistencies here and there, you may get the same feeling I did and have the same desire I did, which was to become a spy. Because it's like you know there's something wrong, you just don't know what it is, and you think you might find it. Like all the detective shows you see on television where they seek information. So in this particular case, I felt that way, and it wasn't anything dramatic. I simply opened up the person's dresser and just looked in it out of curiosity's sake. Like, I wonder what's in here. And I found a handwritten letter that was several pages long. And I looked at the end, of course, who's this from? And it was some person, some male person that this creature had dated evidently previously. And this letter was in there. And I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but I just picked one particular section, and I happened to notice a question. And I don't know the exact wording now, but the question was something on the order of, "Hey, I notice when we're together, you tell me that my body is yours, and I am not to touch it on my own without you being there. But the other day, when you found out I did touch it, you acted all excited and told me you wanted to know all the details about what I did to my own self. I don't understand this." Well, that's a perfect question for the cluster B. So I'm imagining the person was using their control, saying, "That part is mine. You don't touch that without my permission," which is controlling. But what I gathered from the letter was that this monster must have said very clearly, "You are not to do this to yourself." And then later, when the person did do it to themselves, it's, "I want to know all about it. Ooh, it's a turn on. Tell me more," which would make anybody's head spin, because it's like, okay, are you against that or are you for it? Because it's not clear. And I noticed, of course, this was someone I hadn't even heard of. Clearly, it was an old letter, and one might be tempted to think, oh, how sentimental. This monster kept this letter for sentimental reasons. Oh, well, think again. Because remember, let's go back to what we said before. These people lack a core self. So when you meet them, if you don't know them too well at first, if they talk a lot, chances are they're trying on different masks, different roles, different behaviors that are nothing to do with themselves. But what I see this letter as is clearly it was written from an empathetic person. Someone who had emotions, someone who felt things, someone who had feelings and was genuinely confused and hurt in ways. So what does the cluster B monster do? Well, they keep these letters not because they're sentimental. They keep them as learning exercises. So what they do is they read the words of a real person, and they know what the subject is. So when it's some touchy subject, they pay close attention to the phrasing and the words. And what they do is, on their next target, when they're attempting to appear to be a real person, they'll borrow from such writings. And television shows, movies, all kinds of sources, which is kind of the reason why, if you've ever dealt with one, you've noticed that today they'll make a claim that classifies them as a certain personality type, and then the next day they'll make a claim that's completely the opposite, and you'll be like confused, saying, okay, which one are you? Well, they're not any of them. They're using these to see which ones work and which ones don't. Never minding that, like, one of the problems with these people is they don't understand that there are more, that words have more inherent meanings than just what the words are. Meaning if they make a certain claim, well, it's not just a claim made for that moment, for that situation, but if it's like a thing about their personality, well, that should extend everywhere. But they don't understand this because they're not real human beings. So they hold on to such treasures to practice and to use different lines on different people, hoping they work. It's not uncommon that they'll talk to you a certain way at the beginning, and then later that way of talking is completely gone, which can be evidenced if you keep cell phone conversations that are text messages, and you scroll way back to the beginning. You can oftentimes tell, like, this looks like it's written by 6 different people. That's how it is, because remember, they lack a core self, so they're borrowing and switching masks to try to get the situation to go the way they want it to. And this also serves to display just one more way that these cluster B people use their targets. They use us for whatever they're getting from us in the beginning. They use us sometimes to make themselves seem more socially acceptable because they're telling the world, look, I'm acceptable because someone like this is with me, or any number of things. Well, they also will use you to appear to be human to the next target, which is really sick and eerie, but it does happen. And I've seen such examples, not necessarily just with this person, but with others. And I'll sit there and analyze it and think, wait a second. And I've learned it doesn't do any good to ask them or question them, because they don't know what to say. They'll say something, but it'll probably leave you more confused. That's just a little tidbit of information for you. And look out for those that you find repeating your same stories right back to you as if it's their own. And if they're doing that, chances are you're dealing with a monster, and it's best to get out before it gets worse, because it will.
Before I go any further, I should probably tell you a little about me, which of course I never would have told you that first date or any date thereafter. Let me tell you just a little something about me, which may help you to put this in perspective. You see, I'm not like other people. Other people have restrictions of which they call boundaries. I ain't got none of that crap. But I've noticed with every single one of the targets I've chased, they always have their boundaries. So when I first date someone new, I'm usually pretty quiet, because I'm just sensing everything and trying to make an understanding of what I'm dealing with so I know how to proceed.
My usual technique works pretty much every time, which is, as I mentioned, I'm pretty quiet. I don't say much. Like on a first date, if you want the truth, I've gone on first dates where I didn't only make love to the date, but I made love to the date's roommate and the roommate's father. So if that gives you an idea of the fact I don't have the normal boundaries, but I couldn't dare expect to go on a first date with you and say, hey baby, is your roommate's father available and him too? That wouldn't go over so well, because I know I'm a unique person. Not many people have my gifts and abilities, so just so you know, the first date I was up for anything, even pregnancy, unprotected, but I've learned through my experience not to say too much, so I let you lead the way. So some of my dates I've gone out with, and when it gets a little bit late, they'd say, well, I don't spend the night with my date, so you're going to have to leave. And I'd be like, really? I don't spend the night with my first dates either. I think we have something in common. And again, it's a total fake, because if he and his roommate would have given me the green light, and the father ought to have been on top of them like white on rice. But I have to play it cool on my first date. So I just went right along with your lead. Oh dear, I don't spend the night with my first date either. I'm so glad someone else has morals in this world. And that helped to hook you in, didn't it? Admit it, didn't it?